Quote, just as fruits are, I read this quote in Arthashastra. Just as fruits are gathered from a garden as often as they become ripe, so revenue shall be collected as often as it becomes ripe. Collection of revenue or of fruits when unripe shall never be carried on. Further, Kautilya advises that taxation should not be raised to such a high degree that it destroys people's economic incentives to engage in productive undertakings, thereby lowering the level of economic activity and material wealth of the kingdom. I do have one or two disagreements with Chanakya, but who the fuck am I to disagree with Chanakya? He was a guy running kingdoms, 2,300 years back. Who knows what his circumstances were? But look at when we are coming to basic philosophy, not hardcore policy. Exactly ye karo jaake. What are the philosophies informing his decisions? There I see that it's absolutely beautiful, and I find myself agreeing with exactly what's written here.
Nandini Nandita Medini Vishwa Vinodini Nandinute Girivaravindya Shirodini Vasini Vishnu Vilashini Jishnunute.
As a leader, how many people really depend upon you? What's the circle of your influence? On that depends what should be your outlook towards these things. So if you are the father or you are the leader of the family, of your family, you are supposed to be socialist. And then as the purview increases further and further, you are supposed to keep it less centralized as much as possible, because you may be one person. In Scandinavian countries, there are maybe 50,000 people dependent on you. The bigger the country, there are 1 lakh people dependent on you, 2 crore people dependent on you, 1.4 crore people dependent on the same prime minister. So if you have the policies meant for a small population on a big population, how is that going to work? That is going to work by taking the help of more and more and more bureaucrats and government employees, right? I don't think I need to make the case that government employees as a rule suck or are corrupt, or even if they want to work really honestly, the system does not allow them to do that. So it's always going to lead to leakage, spillage, wastage of money, and lack of efficiency. They can't be fired. They will be rude to you. All those things are there. So when you are asking for Narendra Modi to take care of most things in your life, you are basically saying to yourself and to your friends that, okay, Narendra Modi is not really going to take care of your lives. It's some IAS who's going to take care of my life, but I trust the IAS blindly. So it's written by Charles WALDAUER, William J. ZAHKA, and Surendra Pal, School of Management, Widener University, Chester, Pennsylvania, USA. Kautilya's Arthashastra, a neglected precursor to classical economics. Very good, nice name for the paper. So what is the abstract? The main proposition that this paper is trying to make is that this paper demonstrates that Kautilya, a great Indian philosopher, statesman, and contemporary of Aristotle, and whose work was lost for more than 1400 years until it was rediscovered in Chennai, anticipated classical economic thought by some 2000 years in the areas of international trade, taxation, and a labor theory of value. This aspect of Kautilya's philosophy of government has been overlooked by historians of economic thought, and we believe that his contributions should receive appropriate and overdue recognition. Now the introduction. Kautilya, the great Indian philosopher, statesman, and contemporary of Aristotle, wrote his Arthashastra as a primer, sort of a gist, for good rule by the king. So it was sort of a manual. The goal of this treatise was to increase the monarch's wealth and that of his realm, his kingdom. As was true of ancient and medieval philosophers, Kautilya did not distinguish between the wealth of the sovereign and that of his subjects. They were one and the same to him, based on the systems of governance of those days. In this respect, Kautilya's approach is akin to the 17th century German cameralist school of economic thought. Kautilya's work continues a long-standing Indian tradition of inquiry into the creation of wealth, very important, which goes at least as far back as the Atharva Veda, circa 1000 BC, at the very least. Unfortunately for the development of economic thought, Kautilya's writings were lost toward the end of the Gupta dynasty in India, around 500 AD, and were not rediscovered until early in the 20th century. Translations by R. Shama Shastri or P. Shama Shastri. Translations from Sanskrit into English and Hindi did not occur until 1915, and subsequent translations into other languages did not take place until the 1920s and 1930s. Unlike his contemporary, Aristotle, Kautilya's views were unknown to medieval and Renaissance philosophical and consequently had no influence on the creation of modern economic theory. David Hume, Adam Smith, David Ricardo and John Stuart Mill, among others, therefore did not have the benefit of Kautilya's thoughts on the best policies and practices for creating and enhancing. So they did not know about Kautilya, then none of Kautilya's thoughts could have had any influence on them, unfortunately. Thoughts on the best policies and practices for creating and enhancing a nation's wealth. In proposing rules and practices by which the king will rule successfully, Kautilya explicitly recognizes that international trade, that is, trade among kingdoms, in goods and services is a major vehicle for increasing the sovereign's wealth as well as that of his subjects. Kautilya also advises his monarch that his wealth and well-being of the kingdom can be most advanced by a fair and efficient system of taxation, one which will supply the king with tax revenue while not stifling economic growth. Okay. Finally, Kautilya advocates a wage system which rewards workers for the economic value they have created and encourages them to work harder and more efficiently. Kautilya's views on international trade. What are some good books for economics? I am new to the subject. Since I'm a college dropout and I read economics books only which are written for lay people, so I'll only recommend books written for lay people only. Okay, so I would recommend you start with Thomas Sowell's book Economic Facts and Fallacies, which we are going to discuss today, and then you can get to his book Basic Economics and Applied Economics, or you can do a small microeconomics course on Coursera.org as well. Issues like sovereignty, etc., divides him from Austrian School of Economics. Yes, there are some differences, of course. Okay. The importance of international trade is emphasized by Kautilya in that he advises the sovereign that foreign relations should be guided strongly by trade considerations. He advises that relationships with southern kingdoms are to be favored over those with northern kingdoms because the southern kingdoms possess greater mineral wealth. As he puts it, quote, possessing immense gold is better than a friend ruling over a vast population. For armies, and we are quoting Chanakya now directly, okay? For armies and other desired objects can be purchased with gold, okay? He's saying because since armies and other desired objects can be purchased with gold. Kautilya also advantages attracting foreigners who possess good technical and other economic development of the realm. Unlike the mercantilists, Kautilya also explicitly recognizes that imports represent a very important way in which the wealth of the realm can be increased. In that, imports can provide the kingdom with products which are either not available domestically, natural resources, for example, natural resources and agricultural commodities, or can be obtained more cheaply from foreign sources through trade than through domestic production. Kautilya fully realizes that exports are not more important than imports as a means for enhancing the kingdom's wealth. It's all about what you have a demand for in your kingdom and what can you really produce. Which was the argument that the guy who was countering Sanjeev Sanyal's book, and he was saying that how did Sanjeev Sanyal is so wrong for saying that Kautilya knew of modern day trade economics, or his ideas translate to today's geopolitics in any way. They do, because of this very reason, that even today in any economics classroom you will be taught this same idea that you should produce what you can produce. Okay, just because you think import substitution will help your economy in the long run doesn't mean you make absolutely bad quality products, or doesn't mean you make a product which you want to just produce but you can't really produce and then make it 5 times 6 times more costly. Kautilya explicitly formulates a comparative advantage view of international trade patterns by stating that it is mutually beneficial to the various kingdoms when the products being imported are cheaper than those that can be obtained domestically and will fetch higher prices to the exporter than can be gotten in domestic markets. So you see that commie YouTuber who was saying that Sanjeev Sanyal is so stupid for saying these things. This is written in a peer-reviewed journal only. It's not Op India that I'm reading it from. Kautilya proposes heavy state regulation of trade, both so as not to undermine state monopolies and not to aid potential adversarial kingdoms. Kautilya also advocates price and profit controls, being concerned about just and fair prices and profits. This is similar to Aristotelian and Christian schoolmen doctrines concerning economic justice and fairness in commercial transactions. Quote, Kautilya imposed a heavy taxation on imported foreign goods of luxury. On the articles of common consumption, light duties were imposed. Fair enough. Kautilya supports the use of tariffs, both import and export duties, primarily as revenue-raising devices for the monarch, rather than as mechanisms for altering trade patterns. Quote, import rates intended for revenues rather than for trade limitation generally ranked between 4% and 20% ad valorem. Kautilya urges the monarch to create trade missions to promote trade with other kingdoms, and he especially supports bilateral trade arrangements in products. In fact, he counsels against unilateral trade, where products are exported or imported for money or bullion only. He stresses the need to exchange commodities for commodities so that both kingdoms may be mutually enriched. That was the economics of those days. The technology, the products themselves were relevant for those days only. This stress on two-way trade in products is based on the desire to raise tax revenues for the monarch through both export and import duties. His views on international trade are most clearly spelled out in Book 2 of the Arthashastra, chapter 16, which specifies the duties of the king's superintendent of commerce. Quote, the superintendent shall show favor to those who import foreign merchandise. Mariners and merchants who import foreign merchandise shall be favored with the remission of the trade taxes, so that they may derive some profit. Foreigners importing merchandise shall be exempted from being sued for debt unless they are local associations and partners. Shastri's translation. Kautilya also enunciates rules governing the export of state-owned commodities. Okay. The sale of the king's merchandise in foreign countries, having ascertained the value of local produce as compared with that of foreign produce that can be obtained in barter, in exchange. The superintendent will find out by calculation whether there is any margin left for profit. If no profit can be realized by selling the local produce in foreign countries, he has to consider whether any local produce can be profitably bartered for any foreign produce. He may take his merchandise to other countries through rivers, having gathered information as to the transactions in commercial towns along the banks of rivers. He shall transport his merchandise to profitable markets and avoid unprofitable ones. Fair enough. Thus, Kautilya recognized that trade based on the principle of comparative advantage would be to the material benefit of both exporting and importing nations. This is absolutely a modern idea. Now, Kautilya's principles of taxation. This section of the paper focuses on the Kautilyan tax system, which was remarkable for how extensive it was, how detailed, how well it conformed to modern principles of good tax systems. In advising the ideal tax system, Kautilya enunciates a set of quote-unquote principles of taxation remarkably similar to the modern-day criteria first formulated by Adam Smith as quote-unquote canons of taxation. In his book Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, thus, Kautilya's views on the elements of a good tax system predate modern economic thought by 2000 years. Quote, Kautilya's discussion of taxation and expenditure, apparently in keeping with traditional doctrine, gave expression to three Indian principles. Taxing power is limited. Taxation should not be felt to be heavy or exclusive. Tax increases should be graduated. There should not be sudden jumps in taxes. Kautilya recognized that a prosperous and stable kingdom had to be founded on a well-developed and well-administered tax system. The importance of public finance to the successful reign by a monarch is underscored by his succinct advice to his sovereign, which is that, quote, all undertakings depend on finance. Hence, foremost attention must be paid to the treasury. Thus, when both the receipts and expenditures are properly earned for, the king will never find himself in financial or military difficulties. The army is sometimes the means of securing the wealth acquired, but wealth is always the means of securing both the treasury and the army. Since all activities depend on finance, financial troubles are more serious. Dharmasya moolam artha. In Kautilya's view, finance was so important to the success and well-being of the sovereign that it, along with the army, was under the direct control of the king. In the ideal Kautilyan state, the monarch's revenues came from two major sources: sales of minerals, timber and agricultural products from the king's lands and mines, and taxes levied on private income, wealth and products, including exports and imports. As presented in the Arthashastra, Kautilya's advice to his monarch on the ideal tax system is based on achieving the following objectives: gaining as much tax revenue as possible for his king, promoting economic growth and development within the kingdom, ensuring that resources are used efficiently, and applying taxes that are quote-unquote fair and just. Now, the person who has written this paper has consciously put fair and just under quotes because these are very ambiguous and very misused terms, okay, especially in economics. As a noted student of modern public finance observed, the Kautilyan system of taxation resembled that of the Roman Empire at its height, which is taxes were levied on income, wealth in the form of both real and personal property, and market transactions, which is sales, including both export and import duties, as well as poll taxes on all adult males. Further, Kautilya recognizes that the quote-unquote ideal tax system should embody the following principles. It would be convenient to pay, easy to calculate, inexpensive to administer, fair, equitable in its burden, non-distortive of economic behavior in its impact. Okay. I see. This is why people who think Kautilya was some big socialist or ancient Indian kingdoms were socialist should read what we just read. Okay. Listen to this. What is the definition of an ideal tax system? It should be convenient to pay. ओके, टैक्स देने के लिए तुमको मतलब सर का बाल मत नहीं उखाड़ना है. इट शुड बी इजी. नेक्स्ट, इट शुड बी इजी टू कैलकुलेट how much tax you are supposed to pay. It should be inexpensive to administer. Okay, टैक्स अगर 100 रुपये टैक्स उठाना है किसी से, वो उठाने के लिए अब तुम 80 रुपये खर्च कर दोगे फ्रॉम द साइड ऑफ गवर्नमेंट. दैट कैनॉट हैपन. ओके, दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू रिमेंबर. It should be equitable and fair in its burden. And how do we know what is fair and equitable? Because in the very next line, it's been specified. It's being said that it's non-distortive of economic behavior. Okay. If you are buying, let's say, a keyboard, and because of your taxes, you decide to not buy a keyboard, not become a musician, that should not happen. Taxes should be in such a way that you feel like, okay, I can pay the tax and I'll buy the keyboard anyway. That is how taxation should be done. This is what I am saying when I say that Chanakya may not be a full-on goddamn libertarian, but he was not a socialist by any means. He was not BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, World Economic Forum kind of a guy. Okay, he wasn't going around saying, he was not making a word salad jumble of sustainability, development, human-centric development of the developer, developing development of development. वैसा कुछ नहीं बोल रहा है चाणक्य यहाँ पे. I do have one or two disagreements with Chanakya, but who the fuck am I to disagree with Chanakya? He was a guy running kingdoms, okay, 2,300 years back. Who knows what his circumstances were? But look at, when we are coming to basic philosophy, not hardcore policy, कि exactly ये करो जाके. What are the philosophies informing his decisions? There I see that it's absolutely beautiful, and I find myself agreeing with exactly what's written here. Non-distortive of economic behavior in its impact, which is to say it should be neutral, and in general it should not inhibit economic growth and development. Your taxation should not should not destroy, should not hamper your economic growth and development. अब बताओ ऐसा taxation है हमारे यहाँ पे? In keeping with the criteria of convenience, equity, neutrality and promoting economic growth, modern taxes could be paid in gold coins, usually silver or copper, livestock, mostly cattle, agricultural products, minerals and timber, and personal services. For example, working on the construction of roads, canals, forts, laboring in the king's mines, or logging in the king's forests, or serving without pay as a soldier. Kautilya advises that taxes should be collected only when people have the capacity to pay. Now, where are the socialist BJP supporters? Tell me, what do you think of this? Especially the thing that we were discussing a few live streams back, that when tax rates are actually lower, tax revenue collection becomes higher, because there is an additional social cost, there's risk, and there's the additional cost of hiding your wealth away to some other country in Sweden or Panama, right? because you want to avoid paying taxes in your country. So when the taxes are lower and when the rich person finds themselves able to pay those, they don't take the extra hassle and extra expenditure or the extra social and reputation risk for hiding away all his cash in other countries. He says that, okay, I'll pay it here only. So that's exactly being described here. Kautilya advises that taxes should be collected only when people have the capacity to pay. So now today we can't depend on when they have the capacity to pay, but the core philosophy, the underlying philosophy is same. Quote, just as fruits are, I read this quote in Arthashastra, just as fruits are gathered from a garden as often as they become ripe, so revenue shall be collected as often as it becomes ripe. Collection of revenue or of fruits when unripe shall never be carried on, unless so that their source may not be injured, causing immense trouble. Let me check some comments now. Did you watch Sandeep Sanyal's new interview on beer biceps rewriting? Cause comment disappeared. Oh, okay, literally brilliant and one of his best interviews. I watched it as soon as it was uploaded. At one point, Sandeep Sanyal said that, see, so many people don't pay taxes. If people did pay their taxes honestly, we could actually lower the economic rate. And I don't know why Sandeep Sanyal said that. What I'm saying, Sandeep Sanyal knows this inside out. He's basically वो मानस शिष्य बोलते हैं जिसको, an intellectual disciple of Frederick A. Hayek, okay, the Nobel Prize winner. So he knows what I'm talking about. Even then he's saying these things. Maybe he has pressure from the government to not go further right on economics than this. So he is waiting for people to become honest so that they pay taxes further and then they will reduce the tax rate. No, it's not going to happen. You will have to reduce taxes so that people don't feel the motivation to take the extra hassle to not pay taxes, okay? That's the only thing I disagree with Sandeep Sanyal in that entire interview. Exactly, they did not collect tax in that Mahasthangarh flood inscription. Right. To help them and actually distributed money to get it back later. Yeah, well pointed out. Guys, listen to what Neener is saying here. We discussed this in a previous live stream. I'll upload that video separately as well. Where we discussed how Chanakya treated Bengal, okay, Vanga region, when there was a large famine or flood. The thing that concerns me is BlackRock's collaboration with Reliance. Like, on what basis did Center allow it? Center, first of all, doesn't know of those things, all nitty-gritties that Vivek Ramaswamy has pointed out, because obviously no one in the government of India has probably read Sandeep Sanyal's book, because they just released 1 or 2 years back, right? So they have probably no clue of these things. Sandeep Sanyal has a rough idea because he did share those videos of Patrick Bet-David. So how much is Modi going to listen to Sandeep Sanyal, and that too based on a podcast of Patrick Bet-David and Joe Rogan? So fruits are gathered when they should be gathered. Further, Kautilya advises that taxation should not be raised to such a high degree that it destroys people's economic incentives to engage in productive undertakings, thereby lowering the level of economic activity and material wealth of the kingdom. Quote, thus, a wise collector general shall conduct the work of revenue collection, that production and consumption should not be injuriously affected. Financial prosperity depends on public prosperity, abundance of harvest, and prosperity of commerce, among other things. This seems like I'm reading Thomas Sowell only. According to Kautilya, the amount of tax liability should be certain and known and convenient to pay. Quote, collection of revenue at a season when people were unable to pay is forbidden because it injures the source and causes immense trouble. Exactly what Neener just pointed out. This is what he did when Mahasthangarh in Vanga, which is today in Bangladesh, that area got flooded. In Kautilya's view, the tax system should be fair and tax rates should reflect people's ability to pay in terms of wealth or income or sales revenue. Quote, the policy is to make the richer section of the peasantry or those who hold lands in fertile areas of high productive caliber to contribute more, have higher tax rates apply. Okay, now socialists will be happy. So these are middle grounds. You can agree to some extent with Kautilya and you can disagree with some extent to Kautilya. And to grant exemptions from his liability where the cause of production and development may suffer through high taxation. So you see, even in this one paragraph, you can agree with half of it, you can agree with, you can disagree with the other half. So Chanakya is truly middle of the road. Higher rates of sales taxation apply to the most expensive commodities traded, gold, silver, diamonds, pearls, etc. And progressively lower rates of sales taxation apply to less expensive commodities, for example, cloths, threads, grains and dairy products. and finally firewood or earthen vessels, bamboo, etc. A similar system of graduated tax rates apply to the occupational privilege and income taxes levied on artisans and craftsmen, where the highest rates are levied on the most skilled workers and the lowest rates are assigned to the least skilled. Yeah, this is a bit of a problem. So if the highest skilled worker is taxed at the highest rate, then you end up disincentivizing the person's motivation to gather that skill in the first place. Kautilya advocates a highly structured and centralized revenue system with extensive usage of broad-based taxes. The system is supervised by the Collector General of Revenues, Samaharta, who reports directly to the monarch and is equal in importance and influence to the Commander-in-Chief of the army. All the superintendents of the king whose activities generate revenues for the sovereign report to the Collector General of Revenues as concerns the revenues collected. Superintendents of gold, mines, storehouse, commerce, forest products, tolls, weaving, agriculture, liquor, slaughterhouse, prostitutes, ships and passports. So remember guys, I argued this when I was defending वो महाराष्ट्र का Fadnavis's wife, that I'm in favor of legal prostitution, and it was legal in a Chanakyan state also, but it was regulated obviously. Responsibility for gathering information on which the collection of tax revenue and its auditing is based resides in the village accountants, Gopas, each responsible for 5 to 10 villages, who in effect are the census takers. These Gopas are required to inventory all the real and personal property wealth in their domains for wealth tax purposes, the number of adult males for poll tax purposes, the annual income and expenditure of each household for income tax purposes, and the number and type of merchants and artisans, as well as volume of business done for both sales and occupational license tax purposes. The breadth and detail of modern census taking revealed that of ancient revealed or kya hai word revealed, I've never heard this word, revealed that of ancient Egypt under the pharaohs, and was the most extensive census existing before the Industrial Revolution. Wow, listen to this. With reference to the US federal government, the Gopas combined the functions of the Internal Revenue System and the Bureau of the Census. Under the tutelage of Kautilya, the Mauryan tax system was as extensive as any that exists in this modern age. As would be expected in a pre-industrial economy, real property and excise taxes were major sources of tax revenue. Because of the detailed census conducted by the Mauryan kingdom, however, considerable revenue was derived from personal property and poll or head taxes. As well, taxation in the form of occupational licenses. Even income taxation was employed. Thus, Kautilya clearly enunciated well before the rise of classical economic thought a detailed, all-inclusive and effective tax system. Now, Kautilya's labor theory of value. Tax the hell out of legal prostitution like alcohol, cigarettes, etc. It can't be tax the hell out of it, okay? Because if you tax the hell out of it, then again you incentivize a black market of that product. So it has to be reasonable all the time. Okay. Nina is saying, and Nehruvian historians used to say Mauryans and Chanakyans were socialists. Yeah, for them everyone's a socialist. Netaji is socialist, Chanakya is socialist, Ashoka is socialist, Chandragupta Maurya is socialist, Milton Friedman ko bhi socialist bol dega kisi din. Because they saw the word welfare in their texts and said, ye to socialism, communism hi hoga. Yeah. And actually the Penguin version of Arthashastra, which I'm reading, it was translated, I think, in 1997 or 1998 by Ellen Rangarajan. He specifies this in the introduction only, that, okay guys, we are talking about welfare here. Welfare does not mean freebies, okay? Welfare ka translation hai Yogakshema. Yogakshema means good of the people. So if you are a socialist, you may think Yogakshema means giving them freebies. If you are Milton Friedman, you think Yogakshema means incentivizing them to work harder and keep all their earnings and be prosperous. वही Yogakshema है. मगर योगाक्षेम का सिर्फ एक मीनिंग नेहरू बना देगा तो नहीं चलेगा. योगाक्षेम का ट्रांसलेशन है वेलफेयर इन इंग्लिश अर्थशास्त्र. The things that you mentioned will still have ample supply even being under status of illegality. Exactly. Should meth and MDMA be legalized and taxed? I don't think meth should be legalized because there's absolutely, it's only and only detrimental to your health. But MDMA has psychedelic benefits as well, so I think it should be legalized and taxed. What were Chanakya's views on legality taxation of gambling? Regulated. Looked down upon, but legal and regulated. Heavily regulated. Are you following MP politics? BJP has jumped into freebie politics for Vidhan Sabha elections in December. I'm not following it extensively, but I do know that they are announcing one freebie after another and they are going to increase the inflation this way. Ash Ketchum, Schedule 1 drugs in USA, right? Kautilya's labor theory of value. 2 millennia before Adam Smith enunciated his labor theory of value, Kautilya in the Arthashastra held that a just wage to be paid to workers should be based on the amount of time spent on the job, the amount of output created, and the skills necessary to perform the required tasks. Kautilya explicitly recognizes 3 distinct components for determining the market value of labor: the level of skill required, the human capital element, labor hours worked, and units of output produced, the labor productivity element. As stated by Binoy Chandra Sen in his treatise Economics in Kautilya, quote, a uniform and flat rate of wages for laborers of all sorts is impracticable in an advanced economic condition where commodities of various gradations of value representing different kinds and degrees of manufacturing skill are produced and used by consumers. Interesting. Up until here, you will see that it will actually piss off both libertarians and socialists again, okay? Because it's a middle of the road kind of a view. The socialist will say, no. Everyone should get or the communist will say that everyone should get an equal salary. From Ambani to Ambani's chaprasi, everyone should have a similar salary, and there should be no division, no uch neech in our samaj. Okay, that would be the leftist view. Now, the libertarian would point out that you can't really determine half of the things that are mentioned as a criteria here. Okay, think of OnlyFans. OnlyFans mein, how will you decide what's the skill level, or how many hours of work? Okay. So OnlyFans prostitutes, they basically are destroying this idea of labor theory of value. So we need new formulations as well. The wages of a laborer cannot but be dependent on the market value of the article produced. Agreed. The latter again depends on the cost of its production. Here, it does not apply to OnlyFans and modern productions of a lot of things, including the cost of material used. See, YouTubers में भी ये apply नहीं होता है. There are so many YouTubers who have so much better production quality than mine, but their subscribers are stuck at 800 subscribers, 1000, 1500 subscribers, including the cost of material used. Thus, the settlement of just wages is a complicated matter depending not only on the skill of the worker, fair enough, skill of the worker employed, but also on the total outturn of his work. That is both quality and quantity of the job completed by him. These things can be misinterpreted and misused if anyone wants, because they are pretty ambiguous and vague. They had to be broad, right? Anyone can agree or disagree with these things. Arthashastra, the person who found the original manuscript. Arthashastra in his translation Kautilya's Arthashastra cites that among the duties of the superintendent of weaving shall be the setting of wages paid to weavers. Wages shall be fixed according to the threads spun are fine, as the threads spun are fine, coarse, or of middle quality, and in proportion to a greater or less quantity manufactured, and in consideration of the quantity of threads spun, wages shall be cut short if making allowance of the quality of raw material, the quantity of the thread spun out is found to fall short. In determining wages of labor in general, Shamashastri quotes Kautilya in establishing the following procedure. Quote, as to wages not previously settled, the amount shall be fixed in proportion to the work done and the time spent in doing it. Wages being previously unsettled, a cultivator shall obtain 1/10 of the crops grown, a herdsman 1/10 of the butter clarified, a trader 1/10 of the sale proceeds. Wages previously settled shall be paid and received as agreed upon. So ये तो है कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एनफोर्समेंट का काम आ गया है यहाँ पे, जो कि है जुडिशियरी का काम, और हमारा तो जुडिशियरी तो डिसाइड करेगा कि किस टेररिस्ट को कब छोड़ना है. To prevent deception by employers, Kautilya lays down that cultivators or merchants shall either at the end or in the middle of their cultivation or manufacture pay the laborers proportionate wages. Payment to labor is not contingent on marketing of goods. Production should not be hampered by the irresponsible conduct of the workers. See how balanced this is. तो employers का deception prevent करने के लिए सरकार काम करेगा, which is Modi's slogan from about 10 years back, that small government maximum governance. ये है maximum governance, okay? At the same time, payment to labor is not contingent on marketing of goods. Production should not be hampered by the irresponsible conduct of the workers. तो unionबाजी भी kind of banned है, at least if we look upon the underlying philosophies of Chanakya. Guilds of artisans, Sangha Bhrata, often functioned as contractors and employed semi-skilled and unskilled laborers. To protect these laborers, Kautilya, as cited by Narayan Chandra Bandyopadhyay in his book Kautilya, recommends that a board of overseers review the guild contracts concerning wage rates and working conditions. So yeah, there's a difference between guild and unions, right? Now, when it comes to our Komi Bengal, the guilds of at least Tollywood basically work as a union only, okay? So the problem with guilds in Tollywood, I don't know about Bollywood, but at least in Bengal, the Tollywood guild creates so many extra problems that you have to end up hiring people you don't need. You end up hiring for a basic, let's say a music video shoot of a big celebrity inside the Tollywood studios, or if he's working with Tollywood gilded workers, okay, card carrying people. So you'll have to end up hiring people who you don't need. First of all, you'll have to hire someone for holding a specific kind of light which is not even required today, but guild का rule है तो है, and वो change नहीं हुआ है. So these are the problems with guilds that we face even today. So I would shift a little to the right of Kautilya here and say that guilds are also not that required, but guilds should operate not officially. Guilds should operate unofficially. Now what I'm saying is maybe not really practical in the real life, but there should be some understanding amongst, let's say, let me give you the example of musicians. If everyone undercuts everyone, okay, then there's no end to it. Okay, then even the employer doesn't have to suppress your wages. You are suppressing your own wages as a musician. Okay, let's say maybe the top composer in Tollywood, let's say, charges 50,000 rupees for composing and arranging a song. Okay, if you are a newcomer, you charge 1,000 rupees, 1,500 rupees. Maybe you have arranged already 5-6 songs, but still, of course, you are a newcomer. So you charge 1,500, 200 or 2,000 rupees, 1,500 rupees, 3,000 rupees. Okay. Now, what happens when you have made 50, 60 songs, okay, arranged and composed 50 songs, 60 songs, and then maybe you are feeling a little extra greedy, or maybe you are not getting some work recently, whatever, because of your maybe because your compositions were bad, or because your behavior is bad, for some reason or the other, you are the one who is getting lesser work than the guy who has made lesser numbers of songs than you. Now, to undercut those people, you end up charging $1,500 just like the person who has made maybe 5-10 songs in his life. Then what happens? Your skill is actually more. Your skill is more, but you are charging lesser than everyone. So now that becomes a huge problem. Then everyone has to end up charging less, because otherwise everyone goes to him. No one else gets any work. Okay. Now here also there has to be a balance, because if you do this, I mean, if you prevent people from undercutting others, then no one, even directors and producers, don't get a different list of hierarchies of composers. Okay. I would argue that in India, basically every director would love to work with M.M. Keeravani and A.R. Rahman only. Why are they working with someone else? Why would anyone work with me? Why would anyone work with me in the world? I am nowhere near A.R. Rahman, M.M. Keeravani or Hans Zimmer, right? That is because I am basically undercutting A.R. Rahman, and A.R. Rahman is basically undercutting Hans Zimmer. So thoda bahut undercutting bhi hoga, but you can't undercut all your fellow colleagues to the extent that you are a great composer and you charge $500. So there's a balance to be struck here. But if you make an official guild have rules enforced by the government, the guild basically becomes a union. That's a huge problem. Now, summary and conclusion. Kautilya, the great Indian philosopher and statesman, in writing his epic treatise on the art of good government, the Arthashastra, enunciated classified views on international trade, principles of taxation, and the labor theory of value. Writing more than 2,000 years before Hume, Smith, Ricardo, and J.S. Mill, John Stuart Mill, Kautilya anticipated their thoughts on the importance of conducting trade in accordance with the principle of comparative advantage. That imports are as important as exports in promoting a nation's economic development and growth. Okay, तो नेहरू वालों ने, सोशलिस्ट ने import substitution कर दिया था. कुछ भी import नहीं होगा. ओके, कोका कोला बेचोगे, कोका कोला का इंग्रेडिएंट्स बताओ, नहीं तो कोका कोला भी बेचने नहीं देंगे. तो दैट्स नॉट व्हाट चाणक्य इज सेइंग. and that reciprocal demand will determine the value of commodities in bilateral and multilateral trade. He also clearly anticipated Smith and Ricardo on the principles of effective taxation that will result in an ideal system of taxation, one which will promote economic growth and development, ensure that resources are used efficiently. This is what I'm arguing. When anyone's defending हमारा गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का डेवलपमेंट ऑफ द डेवलपिंग डेवलपमेंट, तब जो होगा ये एफिशिएंसी जाएगा पूरा गड्ढे में. Used efficiently, there can be no efficiency with the bureaucracy, whose burden is borne fairly and which distorts economic decision making as little as possible. Economic decision making जो है आपका as a private citizen, that should not be distorted because of the amount of tax you pay. That's the foremost philosophy that Chanakya is making, a case that Chanakya is making, okay? Kautilya was also far ahead of his time in developing a labor theory of value, in trying to determine what was a quote-unquote just wage for workers. Anticipating the thoughts of Smith and Ricardo, he explicitly recognized that the value of labor depend on the level of skills employed, time spent on the job, and the amount of output produced. He also was cognizant that the market value of labor also reflects the market value of the product created. Beautiful. One can only conjecture that trade theory, principles of taxation, and the labor theory of value associated with classical economic thought might have evolved much earlier, perhaps in the 14th or 15th centuries, if Kautilya's views had been known to scholars such as St. Thomas Aquinas in the late Middle Ages or early mercantilists in the Renaissance. This is another example of Occidental philosophical thought suffering from not having access to Oriental philosophical thought. Well said.
जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि